working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. Flooding caused by incessant rains closed several road sections in summer provinces, according to the Department of Public Works and Highways Regional Office. Tens of thousands of people were under evacuation orders in California as the state was ravaged by the latest in a barrage of storms that have left at least 17 people dead.
From the north.
Located in eastern Borneo, the world's third largest island, Nusantara is set to replace sinking and polluted Jakarta as Indonesia's political center by late 2024. But Nusantara's Point Zero reveals the scale of the new capital's potential impact on a biodiverse area that is home to thousands of animal and plant species. In New York, 7,000 nurses, including Philippine nurses, still off the job at some major hospitals tonight, disrupting health care for thousands of New Yorkers. Our correspondent from New York, Joan Soriano, is at the scene. First in our news, tens of thousands of people were under evacuation orders in California as the state was ravaged by the latest in a barrage of storms that have left at least 17 people dead. Let's listen in.
We are also tracking the significant storm events. We are into atmospheric river number 5. That will begin tonight and last through Tuesday. We are also forecasting a subsequent atmospheric river later in the week, possibly January 12th through 14th. So this continues to be a long duration event. We also have additional updates to our forecasting revolving around geographic landfall of this particular atmospheric river event, a shift from the North Bay area to a little bit further south in the Southern Bay area, and moving easterly through the Central Valley.
Floods kill more individuals than any other natural disaster. We've already had more deaths in this flood storm since December 31st than we had in the last 2 fire seasons of the highest fire acreage burned in California. It really is representative that our behavior is really representative of how we can keep ourselves safe. Water rises quickly, water cuts out evacuation routes. A car can float in 12 inches of water. So it's really, really extremely important that you stay vigilant, you listen to your county emergency alerts, that you heed the warnings of road closure signs, that you don't walk, drive in water that you can't judge the depth of.
We're anticipating some very intense weather coming in, higher gusts in addition to the intensity of the precipitation and the flooding. You've seen trees that have collapsed and smashed cars, homes. We've been in contact consistent with the White House requesting approval of an emergency declaration. This is in addition to the emergency declaration that we passed statewide. We continue to, around the clock, be working closely with our local emergency offices to make sure that they have the resources they need. We were just down walking some of the sites with our Conservation Corps that were out there filling up sandbags, hundreds of crews up and down the state. These floods are deadly. Be cautious over the course of the next week.
Torrential downpours caused flash flooding, closed key highways, toppled trees, and swept away drivers and passengers, including a 5-year-old boy who remains missing in Central California, with even more rain and snow set to batter America's most populous state. A fresh storm is set to pound the state with as much as 7 inches or 18 centimeters of new rain in Northern California by Wednesday, U.S. time, and several more feet of snow in the Sierra Nevada mountains, according to the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service described an endless onslaught of atmospheric river events that is the most powerful storm system since 2005. California Governor Gavin Newsom said at least 34,000 people had been told to flee the storm, with more danger expected among the 1,814,000 Philippine-born Filipino Americans. The states with the largest concentrations of Filipinos are in California, which is 44.8%. Now, storms have not let up in California over the past few weeks, causing widespread flooding. More updates from Ivan Sanchez, who is in Los Angeles, California. Ivan.
On this 10th day of the new year, Los Angeles County residents remain besieged by a severe weather pattern. After a bomb cyclone hit the entirety of California last Thursday, a second storm pattern arrived in Southern California, bringing heavy rain to the Los Angeles area in the last 24 hours, with 2 local cities, Porter Ranch and Woodland Hills, each receiving 6 inches of rain since yesterday. While California is in great need of precipitation after several years of drought and annual wildfires, the soil condition is so dry that it cannot absorb the heavy rains quickly enough, causing street and freeway flooding, mudslides in local mountainous regions, and infrastructure damage, specifically causing power outages affecting more than 200,000 businesses and residents within the state, and at least 14 deaths since yesterday. 80 miles away in Santa Barbara, flooding led to the closing of both sides of the 101 freeway. Potholes, including one big enough that it engulfed 2 cars in Tattoo's last night, also developed from rain-caused erosion. Residents of hillside communities have been told to be on standby for evacuation orders, which usually direct victims to local high schools or community colleges set up as evacuation centers. California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency last week prior to the bomb cyclone. Yesterday, President Biden declared a federal state of emergency for California, designating emergency resources to further alleviate the impact of these storms and to prevent further destruction. Residents anxiously await additional rain forecasted for the remainder of the week, as California finds itself in the middle of the strongest jet stream of storms since 2005. Ivan Sanchez, Los Angeles, California, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Here in the country, flooding caused by incessant rains closed several road sections in summer provinces, according to the Department of Public Works and Highways Regional Office. Now, the affected road sections are within national roads linking different towns in the provinces of Samar. Take a look. The most flooded is the road in Arteche town, blocked by 1.4-meter deep floodwater. The non-stop rain also triggered a landslide in Caray village in San Miguel town, Leyte province, closing half of the lane of the road. It took 6 hours for the maintenance workers to clear the debris. DPWH Eastern Visayas Regional Director Edgar Tabacan said personnel have been mobilized to regularly check flood and landslide-prone road sections. The DPWH also deployed equipment in strategic areas to conduct immediate clearing activities in case of soil erosions. Eastern Visayas provinces have been experiencing heavy rains since the 3rd of the week of December due to the shear line, low pressure area, and northeast monsoon. In tonight's other news, the twisting road that leads to Indonesia's future capital is lined with dense rainforest and pockets of plantations, punctuated every so often with monkeys enjoying a laze out of the tarmac. Located in eastern Borneo, the world's 3rd largest island, Nusantara is set to replace sinking and polluted Jakarta as Indonesia's political center by late 2024. Let's watch this.
Fokus kita dan tantangannya adalah masa depan orangutan yang semakin hari habitatnya semakin merosot. Itu tantangan terberatnya. Karena pertambahan penduduk, kemudian pembangunan infrastruktur itu pasti akan mengurangi satu kawasan di mana keberadaan habitat juga. Itu.
Kalau kita tidak difilter lautnya akan mempengaruhi kepada biota-biota yang ada di laut. Kalau biota lautnya ini sudah terpengaruh, ya habitat-habitat aslinya ini akan berubah juga nanti. Mungkin juga akan pengaruh kepada perkembangan nelayan yang akan mencari.
Orang tua kami dulu sebelum NKRI sudah ada di sini. Jadi kami berharap kepada pemerintah itu yang bisa memperhatikan kehidupan kami ke depan dan yang sekarang. Jangan sampai kami ini kehidupan kami, ketentraman kami terganggu. Gitu.
We realize anything that is forced is usually has consequences. So this is where my concern more is, if we rush this, we may compromise or we may have repercussion at the end.
To the world economy now, global growth is slowing sharply in the face of elevated inflation, higher interest rates, reduced investment, and disruptions caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, according to the World Bank's latest Global Economic Prospects report. Given fragile economic conditions, any new adverse developments, such as higher than expected inflation, abrupt rises in interest rates to contain it, a resurgence of COVID-19, or escalating geopolitical tensions, could push the global economy into recession. And this would mark the first time in more than 80 years that two global recessions have occurred within the same decade. Let's take a look.
Global economy is on a razor's edge. We are expecting a very sharp downturn this year. This was actually our downside scenario 6 months ago. It is now our baseline. Global growth will be around 1.7%. This is the lowest growth rate outside of global recessions since the early 1990s. There are multiple reasons why we have the slowdown. Of course, we have been going through one of the sharpest interest rate cycle. Interest rates have been increasing around the world. You have significant volatility in food markets, in commodity markets. And then, of course, we have a major outbreak in China. China slowed quite considerably. So a confluence of factors driving the slowdown in the global economy. Because of the possibility of inflation remaining elevated, that could trigger financial stress in some emerging market developing economies, and that could also trigger a global recession. We have a major war in Europe still there. Geopolitical tensions could escalate. Food and energy insecurity could be a problem. Social tensions, another major risk. And of course, COVID outbreaks, we cannot basically rule out. Beyond these, we should always keep in mind risk associated with climate change, the higher likelihood of natural disasters, as well as weaker growth outcomes, much weaker than what we are expecting. And there is this broader risk of fragmentation of global trade, investment, financial networks. We need to consider one important risk, of course, further interest rate increases. Global recession risk is material, and in our calculations, further increases in interest rates by major central banks could trigger a global recession, in the sense that per capita global income might end up contracting. Soft landing is not our baseline. Unless we see a significant decline in inflation in a very short time period, global economy will go through a sharp downturn. Without investment, we cannot generate sustained growth. Without investment, we cannot solve the climate change problem. Without investment, we cannot reduce inequality, we cannot reduce poverty. Investment is at the center of economic growth. Over the past decade, investment was slowing. During the pandemic, investment contracted around 70% of emerging market developed economies. And in the near future, we are expecting investment growth to remain subdued. Small states are quite vulnerable. And over the past 3 years, after they contracted by about 11%, they experienced very weak recovery. They're like canaries in the coal mine. They are telling us the type of impact of these multiple crises having on developing economies and what might come next because of how climate change has been affecting these countries. Small states have difficult challenges. They are not diversified. They are basically relying on a small number of items for their revenues. Most of them rely on, for example, incoming tourists. And during the global pandemic, tourism collapsed, and then they contracted quite a bit. Countries need to basically make sure their house is in order. They have robust policy frameworks, they have clear medium-term plans, and they are undertaking the type of reforms necessary to promote economic growth.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines is keen on expanding its military ties with Turkey. Newly appointed AFP Chief General Andres Centino and Turkish Ambassador to Manila, Niyazi Ekren Aykol, discussed this matter in a courtesy call made by the envoy at the AFP headquarters in Camp Aguinaldo in Quezon City. Centino noted that because the existing Memorandum of Understanding with Turkey only covers defense industry cooperation, the ongoing talks should proceed to expand the relations of both countries by forging a broad military cooperation framework to explore other areas which are not covered under the existing defense agreement. Ambassador Aykol, meanwhile, extended Ankara's commitment to continually assist the AFP in its modernization program as he touted his country's competence in the defense industry. In other news, a 10-year-old Vietnamese boy trapped in a buried hollow concrete pillar at a construction site for 4 days were declared dead last Wednesday. Take a look.
Thì em bé đã tử vong thì phải đưa lên bằng mọi cách sớm nhất để chúng ta lo cái tang sự cho em bé.
Now, rescuers in Dong Thap province in the Mekong Delta had been trying to raise the pillar from the 115-feet hole and cut out young Tai Lee Hao Nam. The boy fell into the 12-inch shaft of the pillar, sunk as part of a new bridge on Saturday, apparently while looking for scrap metal. Bu said the announcement of the boy's death was made after consulting with medical experts. The 19-meter metal pipe was lowered around the concrete tube in which the boy was trapped to allow them to remove mud and try to lift it out. Rescuers had softened and tried to remove mud and water to reduce pressure around the pillar, but days of effort had failed to pay off. In New York, 7,000 nurses still off the job at some major hospitals tonight, disrupting healthcare for thousands of New Yorkers. Our correspondent from New York, Joanne Soriano, is at the scene. Joanne.
Not all heroes wear capes. Some of them wear scrubs. Nurses were hailed as the frontline heroes of the pandemic. Today, thousands of nurses in New York are on strike for better patient care and working conditions. Today is the second day of strikes, which began on Monday at 7 a.m., with 7,000 nurses striking at two major hospitals in New York City, Mount Sinai Hospital and Montefiore, Bronx. Nurses at other hospitals were able to reach agreements before the strike. This is the largest nursing strike in decades. Chronic understaffing, low pay, and long hours are driving nurses to burnout. Nurse-to-patient ratios are a main driving point of negotiations, citing the risk of patient safety.
We're here for our patients first and foremost. That's why we're out here today. We want strict staffing ratios and enforcement language. That's why we're here. We need to hold the hospital accountable for when they continually short-staff us.
At a time when COVID cases, RSV, and the flu are at a high, hospitals say the timing could not be worse. Many have voiced their support for nurses, including the Philippine Consulate General in New York, who stand by the Filipino-American nurses who care for the sick and dying at the expense of their own lives.
I'm here to support the nurses here so that they can retain more nurses and find a safe staffing ratio here. Let's go!
The Nurses Association stressed to New Yorkers to not delay getting hospital care during the strike. Patients should seek hospital care immediately if they need it. Joanne Soriano, New York, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Meanwhile, the Department of Migrant Workers said it is working closely with the Department of Justice to strengthen the monitoring and action against human trafficking activities within ASEAN that target Filipino workers. Take a look.
We are also closely working with the DOJ on illegal recruitment and human trafficking cases. Of course, you are all familiar with the situation in Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. We continue to remain maintain a tight watch on the online illegal recruitment and trafficking of our workers to those places.
Now, to recall, earlier, Senator Risa Ontiveros said the Department of Justice is well positioned to look into the alleged trafficking of Filipinos victimized to participate in cryptocurrency scams in Myanmar. The lawmaker also said it wasn't new for the NBI and the Senate Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality to work together and address these issues of human trafficking. Earlier, Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla ordered the NBI to investigate rogue airport employees, including officials of the Bureau of Immigration allegedly involved in the trafficking of Filipino workers who were duped into cryptocurrency investment scams. The concern came after airport security and police intercepted 3 victims earlier in November last year. The victims reportedly used fake airport access passes or pretending to be employees of various airport concessionaires to enter the boarding gates. Upon closer inspection by airport security, it was also found out that their passports and boarding passes contain counterfeit immigration stamps. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast of ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.